poquito, so thank you.
Spanish sucks. It's horrible. I don't know to talk Spanish.
With a name like Brazil, I should speak Portuguese, but I don't. Welcome everyone to ConnectedLearning.tv. This is a weekly live session that we have. This is our 20th session since we launched in March, and I am told that people from 85 countries, about 11,000 users have viewed the 19 sessions so far. So thank you everyone for participating. Today's topic is digital youth, social movements, and democracy in Brazil. And we are very privileged to have Raquel Recuero with us, who does research on the internet and social media in Brazil, as well as some guests in the Google Hangout. And they'll be introducing themselves in a minute. If you're participating on live stream on the chat, we encourage you to submit questions and comments, and we'll do our best to scoop those into the Google Hangout for some of our, for Raquel and the Hangout participants to answer and address. And then also there's there should be by now a link to a Google Doc, and if you can help by adding to that, adding comments or questions or resources, that would be great. We love the participation there. So before Raquel gets us started, if we can just start with the introductions for the people in the Hangout, and you first, Greg.
Thanks a lot. It's great to be here. My name is Greg Tuke. I'm with Tuke International Consulting, and basically I work with universities and high schools and community groups in the U.S. and primarily in the Middle East, helping link them together to talk about social activism and learn from each other.
Thanks, Greg. Dr. Anton?
My name is Henrique Anton. I'm professor at School of Communication in the University of Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and I'm doing research in media, in digital media and distributed communication. That's it.
Thank you. João?
Hi everyone, my name is João Miguel. I'm from Brazil as well. I'm a sociology student. I study youth movements, and I also work for Global Voices in Portuguese, where we write and translate posts related to citizen media and movements in Brazil, but also in Portuguese-speaking countries.
Thank you, João. So Raquel's going to start us off with just some brief comments, and I know Raquel for the last few years and really been privileged to work with her as a researcher and a blogger in Brazil for DML Central, which is another one of our projects. But Raquel is an associate professor at the Departments of Applied Linguistics and Social Communication in Brazil, and her research focuses on social media and internet, virtual communities, and computer-mediated communication in general. And I know we're excited to hear from her today. I know I am. So Raquel, start us off.
So hi everyone, I'm Raquel, and I'm here to talk a little bit about Brazil and social media and youth and democracy. So let me share my screen here. I made a quick presentation, very quick, and unfortunately I don't think we'll be able to see it full screen, but this is a very focused presentation about how youth are using social media and how social movements and democracy are rising, and also a little bit of the problems we are seeing in between this new movement. So the question we are discussing here today is how are Brazilian youth becoming digital, and what potential does digital media provide for democracy and social movements? So a little bit about Brazil, just for the ones who are not from here. We have more or less 200 million inhabitants. About 36% have a computer at home. About 87% have a cell phone. However, 53% of the population use internet on a regular basis. 70% of the population between 16 and 25 years old use internet on a regular basis. So the amount of people who are actually using internet today, especially the youth, is very big, and it's growing very fast. So just for you to have an idea, Facebook is something rather new in Brazil, because it's been growing from 2 to maybe 3 years, growing steadily. But only in the last 6 months, Brazil had more than 50% growth in Facebook. We are now the second biggest country, about 53 million users. However, Brazil has a long story of social networks usage. So you can see Twitter, Brazil is also big. Orkut, which was the major social network site in Brazil for several years until now, until Facebook. Fotolog was also a social network site of photography, is very much used in Brazil, and Blogger, and a lot of social media tools. So Brazilians have all this experience in using these social network tools, even though we are not a very well-connected country, so to say. And these social network sites, these social tools, these social media tools, they are allowing people to connect, to share information, to exchange ideas, and create social movements. So I think this is very interesting, what is happening in Brazil right now in this usage of social media. For example, we are now seeing in Twitter and Facebook thousands of debates about major issues in the country. So this is a picture of a network of people talking about the Belo Monte power plant. They are building this huge plant in Rio Xingu, near Xingu River, near Amazonia. And people are discussing if it should be if the plant should be built or not. So this is a map I did about people discussing these issues in Twitter. It's interesting because from my point of view, it's the first time here we are seeing these issues being discussed openly in the media, and because social media, because people are discussing these issues in social media, you have traditional media also exploring these issues. And it's not just this case, we have several other cases. For example, our Supreme Court recently made a judgment about gay marriage in Brazil. So there was a huge amount of people discussing. And I think this is very interesting how we are seeing this people talking about these issues, and people listening to other people who don't think like them. So we are seeing a lot of these public debates. And we are seeing new ways to spread democracy. So this is a project I wrote about for Digital Media and Learning blog. It's Eleitor 2010, Elector 2010. It was a project made by two friends from Global Voices, Paula Góes and Diego Casais. And the idea was to make, in 2010 we had presidential elections in Brazil. There was a huge process where people have to vote for several other positions. So this website was a place where people could go and talk about irregular things that were happening during the election. So it was a very collective project where everyone could go and talk about what was happening in the country. So we are seeing new ways to spread democracy through social media, because this is a project that during 2010 it became very popular in Twitter and other social media websites. We also have new ways to create social engagement. So this is another project. It's called Community Voices. It was created by this young man here. His name is René Silva. He's from Rio de Janeiro. And René he's a boy who grew up in the favela, and he was keen enough to find in social media and a place where he could grow his community. And so he has some other friends helping him, and they have this portal now where they can talk about what is happening in their places, where in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro. So this is a very amazing project, because this is youth making space to talk about what is happening in their own places. We are also having other projects. So this slide had a beautiful animation, but I don't have animations here now because Google Hangouts doesn't like PowerPoint. But this is several print screens I got from another interesting social mobilization which happened around the votation of the new forest code in Brazil. So this was very interesting because people were asking the president to veto the new code. So everywhere in social media you would have people posing with posts, making this photo. I forgot the word. Which is the word when you create something in a photograph? Well, they were doing this, and they were asking the president to take action. And this was something very interesting because people were actually discussing what was happening, and people were actually trying to understand what was the new code, what was the proposal, and why others were asking the president to veto the new code and everything. So we are also seeing new forms of social mobilization, and it's very interesting because we are actually seeing some reflex of these movements. Because, for example, when the Supreme Court is voting something, people are discussing what they're voting in Twitter, in Facebook, and this sort of is feeding the media, and so it's also coming back to the court. So it's not something completely disconnected of what is happening. And we also have new ways of learning. So this is something, another project I also wrote about for digital media and learning, which is the small step battle. We made a translation of Batalha do Passinho, which is something that emerged from YouTube. These are young people also from Rio de Janeiro, and usually poor people who like funk, which is a sort of music, very much. And these young people are filming themselves dancing, putting the step online, and inviting other people to do better. So they are creating these groups where they are increasingly making more complex steps and more complex creations in the dance movements, and they are actually using internet to learn other steps and to feed themselves with more complex ideas for their dance. And you can search for them on YouTube. You'll find a lot of amazing stuff. And this was actually a ball where several kids were dancing, and they were fighting through dance each other. So this was also a very interesting project where people are learning, and people are. It's not a project. It was some sort of emergent thing that was happening, and the ONGs actually decided to make a ball where people could compete. So these are new ways of learning as well. And new ways to appropriate the cities and the place where people live. So this is another project. This is actually a project from Porto Alegre that is nearby where I live. The idea was to create a city where the citizens could go and talk about their problems and invite other ones to do something. So it's a very popular project in Facebook. It's portoalegre.cc, and people are making all sorts of annotations around the space, and they are actually bringing these initiatives to their offline lives. For example, once a time, one of the people posted on this site complaining that Guaíba River, which is this blue part you can see in the map on the left, was very polluted and very full of trash. So they got together and they decided to clean the river. So they took like I don't know 100 kilograms of trash from the river. They actually did it. So they have several initiatives where they are getting together and they are deciding what is going to be our next project. So this is also a very interesting project where people are taking part in their own space and doing the things they think are important. However, social media has not always been good. There's also a dark side, I think. And this is something that has been interesting me lately, is how social media has also became the vehicle for all types of discursive violence now. So what we're seeing is not just people making excellent initiatives and growing within social media, but people also spreading the violence and all sorts of violence. For example, this is a print screen from Facebook where you can see a picture of women, and there's the idea is to make fun of women. So it says something like piriguete, which is a bad term for women, are just like Facebook. First you like, then you what's the word in Facebook for this? Then you forgot the word. Yes, thank you. You poke, and in the end you share with your friends. So this is a very sexist and very prejudice message against women, and because this message is like the other messages we are seeing spread in Facebook against religious groups, against vegetarians, against all sorts of minorities, because they are travesties as humor, everything can be said. So everything is okay because it's fun. And we are seeing this violence become quickly more accepted by people, and we are now facing other problems. For example, we have too much information going on, so people are not paying attention to anything. We are having privacy problems especially with young people who are not. So internet is something that is relatively new in Brazil. So we are having all sorts of problems with children and teenagers who are first going online, and they are sharing everything about themselves and about their lives. And so there is also a problem around privacy, around bullying. Bullying is a day-to-day problem now in the schools, especially cyberbullying, where people are creating, children and teenagers are creating communities against their friends, against their teachers, and all sorts of violence associated with bullying. And this last one was wrong. It's not this. I did something wrong here. But the idea was also we are having problems with how much people are engaging themselves in social media because of these other problems. So I think social media now is giving our country and is giving the youth a great potential for doing good. So we are seeing initiatives that have more democracy, more critical thinking, more social engagement, and more social movements arising from social media. But we cannot be naive. We also have all sorts of problems that these problems are not something new. They are within our society, but they are just appearing more on social media. So we also need to think, to study, and to discuss these usages and how social media is sort of showing also the scenes of our society. So this was very quickly, I'm sorry, I took a little bit more of the time that I intended, very quickly about how things are now and things that I'm interested and other people are interested about youth and digital media in Brazil. So, okay, thank you. And now we are going back to the debate.
Raquel, that's an awesome overview of some great examples and also just some emergent themes from Brazil. Thank you. And we're joined by one of your colleagues just now, I think. Maybe in a moment. She'll come back.
Yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to, well, there she is.
There she is.
Raquel, do you want to introduce your colleague? Or?
I think she's not hearing us yet.
Not yet, okay. So we'll go to her when she gets online. But in the meantime, I wanted to give Greg and the others in the Hangout a chance to sort of reflect or respond to any of the things that sort of resonated with you from Raquel's presentation. Greg?
Sure, I'll ask a question. Thanks, Raquel. That was really, really fascinating. One thing you said was that you were saying that some of the social media has provoked discussions about some issues of importance, and you cited sort of Facebook and Twitter. And I'm curious about the ability of people to discuss things in a way that they can come to understand. I was sort of hearing what you said, meaning that like in the States, you know, what I see is a lot of people stating their position, but not really a kind of back and forth when you use Twitter because it's so short, or Facebook because people tend to just kind of state a position. But you were couching it in terms of people really understanding, and I'm wondering if the understanding comes more from, you were saying that that other like major media picks up the story and then maybe they discuss it more, or the Supreme Court then discuss the issue more based on what they were reading. But I'm interested in hearing your view about that dynamic of, does it really lead to more understanding, the social media, or does it just get more people involved because they read about something of importance to them, but it doesn't deepen their understanding?
I don't think these debates are making people change their opinions, but they are exposing people to different opinions, and that makes you think. So I think this is the potential. I may not agree with you, but I have to see what you think. So this is something that makes me think, even though I don't want to change my opinion, it makes me think. So I think this is the potential. However, when you see all this violent behavior emerging from some sort of discussions that are happening, I think this actually has the opposite effect. People shut up because they don't want to be judged. So this is something new I'm observing, especially in Facebook. People are. I just made a research about how people use Facebook in Brazil, and one of the findings is that people are choosing not to comment because they don't want to be exposed, because they don't want to fight, because they don't want to see others who are not their friends criticizing what they're saying. So this can kill much of the potential. So this is something that is worrying me right now.
Thanks. That's a great question, Greg, in response. Before we go to the other Hangout participants that either have a comment or a question for Raquel on her initial presentation, I wanted to give Adriana a chance to introduce herself and sort of talk about her work briefly and how it connects with Raquel and our topic for today.
Hi, my name is Adriana Amaral, and I have been working with social media, and my research is about how people consume the reconfiguration of consumers with music social networks. So my main interest is about how people are using these tools to express their taste on music and genders and so on. But I have been working with young people, of course, that are the main people who uses this kind of services. But I have been researching recently about prejudices and gender prejudices because due to this kind of expressions of self and expressions of tastes, even if it's about music or a TV show or this kind of things mainly. And in this sense, my research have connections with Raquel's work, and we have been working a little bit together in some articles and books here in Brazil. And recently I have been very interested in this thing about the prejudice expressions due to some kind of taste. And I am calling some haters and fandoms and anti-fandoms due to that. And they are how they organize themselves and this kind of this kind of organization.
Thank you, and thanks for making it through what sounded like a terrible rain and traffic to get here. I appreciate it. I wanted to open it up to the other two participants who heard Dr. Untu and who heard Raquel's initial comments, which I thought was a great overview. And if you had any questions or comments or reflections or your own sort of perspective on some of the issues that she raised.
Well, I'd like to ask Raquel about how do you see this kind of prejudice expressions in the contest or in the manifestations and the researches that you have been making?
So I think prejudice is something that was always present in Brazilian society. We have this, we Brazilians think of ourselves as people who don't have any prejudice. We're very friendly, and we are not. We actually have a lot of prejudice, and we are actually not friendly with everybody at all. So I think we're showing much of the sins of our society, much of the problems we have in social media, and I think we need to deal with these problems. I don't think social media is creating the problem. I think it's showing the problems.
Yeah, it's more of a reflection than surfacing something new, which I think is a theme I see in other places as well. Dr. Untu, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name incorrectly, but I wanted to give you a chance to respond to Raquel's initial presentation as well, and then Zhao.
Okay, thanks. Raquel, I think that distributed communication in the internet is also a way to talk back the issues that mass media does all the time. And I think that we ought also use it all the time to up stuff to the YouTube, to make groups in the Facebook, to play games in the network, and they more and more are leaving mass media out of his menu of options of entertainment. How do you see it? I don't know if it's a good diagnosis or not, and how do you see it in your research?
Okay, so I think traditional media is losing ground. I agree with you, and we've already discussed some of it in some events we've been together. But I think they're losing ground because there's so much more asking for our attention. In Brazil, for like 30 years, all we did was for leisure was get in front of the TV and watch Globo, which is the major channel here. And now we're having all sorts of other things calling our attention. So we're seeing Twitter, we're seeing Facebook, and we're seeing other things. We're playing our cell phones. So while we are doing all of these different things, we are not watching TV. So yes, I think they are losing a bit. Traditional media is losing a bit here, and they have to fight with more content and more good stuff to catch our attention, because we don't have time for trash. We need good content. At least I think. I think people are becoming more critical because of social media.
Sometimes I stay a little scared. My little son, he doesn't like of movies. He only want to hang out with his friends in the network. I don't like of movies. Oh, I don't like of do it or do that. I only want to talk and hang out with my friends in the network. Sometimes it scared me.
Hey, Jao, go ahead. I think you had a comment or a question, right?
Yeah, I do. Raquel, it was very interesting to hear you mention the mobilization against the Belo Monte Dam, because I wrote some posts for Global Voices about that, how people used Facebook and Twitter as well to create this kind of movement using hashtags and sharing photos and videos. And also, when you mentioned the hate speech in Facebook, happens a lot, not only about gay marriage, but also related to religion and this new struggle between Catholics and uh, preaches of gospel and etc. And I was wondering, how do you see the use of social media as citizen media? How youth is trying to use Facebook and Twitter to create content, to create news about their places, about their cities, what's going on in the Amazon, for instance. Do you have anything to remark on that?
Um, that's great. I invited you because I saw your posts about Belo Monte, and the thing is, I think you are a great example of how social media is changing things, because you from Global Voices, you are publishing stuff that nobody else is publishing. You are focusing on things that nobody else is seeing, and you are bringing all of this to other people, and people are reading, people are sharing, people are talking about. So while it's not everyone yet, I believe, it may be. It may be in the future. I think people are more critical because of the content we are seeing in social media and because of other people in social media. However, I also feel that we have a problem because, I don't know, I'm kind of skeptical in some points. I think we need to create a space to discuss social media in the schools with younger people, with children, and with teenagers, because social media is currently something good, but it may be something bad. For example, I'm very much scared when I think that my kid is having all her life published in social media. She's having everything she does published by their grandparents, by their aunts, by her aunts, by everyone, her whole life. So when she'll be 15, all her life will be here. So this is something that worries me. What we're doing, how are we interacting and creating digital a digital life, a digital narrative about ourselves? So I don't know, I believe we have to discuss, we have to share this information, and we have to discuss, especially with children and teenagers, because they are not so much aware of the consequences and the effects of their acts. So I think we need discussion space for this bad part of social media.
That was actually a question I had written down, Raquel, after hearing you, was what's the reception of schools and universities to this new environment you're describing, to social media, to the network learning, to peer-to-peer learning? Is it something that's talked about and folded in, or is it not talked about? Is it too new yet?
No, it's not talked about. We have institutional forms of creating education through computers and through internet, which we call EAD, which is distance education, distance mediated education, something like this. However, social media is usually forbidden in most public places and universities. You cannot access Facebook. In most schools, you cannot access Facebook or Twitter or Orkut. So, so we are not discussing because most of our school systems trying to close their eyes to this new media. So because they don't want to have any problems, okay, we don't want to be responsible for what people say in social media, you cannot use social media here. So this is something still going on in most of our universities and most of our schools. So people are using these tools from home or from LAN houses and cyber cafes.
All right, Adriati, I think you had a question or comment. Oh, we can't hear you.
I have one question about the space of internet as media, the distributed communication. What it changes in the communication? Sometimes people talks about internet as a big delivery space to mass media, and others likes to see it as a big conversational space where the collective action is the main actor, the main subject of people. How do you see it as a researcher of social media?
I'm taking a while because I'm turning on and off my mic, so I'm not creating more noise around. So I don't know. I used to think in the beginning that social media was all good, but now I think I was very naive, because all the good potential is there, but we also have a lot of good potential for bad. So I'm not quite sure. I think we need to study a little bit more what is happening and how it's happening, because this is something that has been created by all people using social media. This appropriation they are emerging from the usage people are doing, and this usage is changing every day, because every time you have some new group using Facebook, some new people arriving, we have new usage, we have new ways to behave, and we have new values that are generated within social media.
I think there is a kind of gap between the students and maybe the teachers and professors. I have, for example, a colleague, and he was very upset in in his classes that people were tweeting. And so we were given this lecture together, and he was like very irritated because he doesn't have a Twitter account, and so he wouldn't be able to see the discussions that they had made in their class. So, and I was saying, no, I don't have any problems with that. So, but I think it's not exactly a generation gap, but I use hard user or another level of usage gap that we have in our schools right now. I think that is something that we have to study more.
Hey, Raquel, there were two questions that had come in from the live stream, and the first one that I saw was this notion that different groups are using social media to sort of advocate their own causes. And the example was there are feminist groups that are using social media to sort of advocate, to fight against sexism, and then there are sort of the other groups that are opposed to them that are also using it. Did you have a comment on how different groups are sort of using these tools, and what you're sort of seeing there?
Yes, I think because the discourse in this media is becoming very very flamed, the answer is also very flamed. So we're having a fight where all the groups are fighting with the same arms, the same guns. They are using violence against violence, and so we're not being effective in changing the way people think because we're being violent. So, for example, if I'm a Christian and I see a message against Christians, I tend to react very violently because I don't know the people who said that, and I feel offended. So I went to Facebook and say, because you are this and you are that and you don't know anything, blah, 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 blah. And so people get mad at me, and we start a flame war. So we go nowhere because we are using violence against violence. So the feminists, sometimes they're creating the same things the anti-feminists are doing in Facebook. So I think this is the problem. We are feeling this violence, and so we are fighting with violence as well. And Adriana, I think she has a contribution to make.
Joanna, did you have a comment on this topic?
No, I'd like to say that this like symbolic violence, it happens in all kinds of stuff, since like a movie or the critics or like a band, or in the entertainment level, as also in the political and this kind of religious discussions that we are having in the social media. I think Raquel has a good point, because we are fighting, it's like fighting fire with fire, as Metallica would say. But we cannot, I don't know how we can perceive different appropriations of this tools and social media that could be used in a different way that we are using now. I don't know why is it happening that way, if it's a human or a Brazilian behavior, but I guess people sometimes tend to overreact some things, critics or products or anything, discourses, and in other way they are doing the same things they done in their everyday life. I don't know.
Greg, I think you had a question or a comment along these lines. Is that right?
Yeah, I do have a comment and a question related to what's happening with social movements with youth. That I'm wondering if you, Cal, or maybe John or others may have thoughts about this too, are seeing any new strategies or any new connections that youth are making outside of their country. You know, it could be on an issue of violence against women or maybe an environmental issue, but are you seeing any significant examples where youth are making connections with other groups that are concerned about that same cause, could be something about global change, and then doing something about it both in their country and connecting with others that are working on that issue externally and getting any more
I think we lost Greg. Is it just me or?
No, I lost it.
We lost Greg. Okay, we'll see if he comes back on. Raquel, did you? There was a second. Oh, there you are, Greg. Go ahead. We lost you for a moment.
Okay. Did you get the question about the connection internationally and wondering if you're seeing any of that in Brazil on issues where youth have connected internationally? And I'd like to hear examples about it.
I think maybe João Miguel has a better contribution because I'm not seeing this sort of connections right now.
Hi, sorry, the mic was off. Well, we saw last year that some movements, especially against the Belo Monte hydroelectric plant, they were kind of inspired by the Occupy movements. So there was actually an occupation of the dam site, construction site, and they called it Occupy Belo Monte. They created a hashtag on Twitter and also on Facebook, sort of inspired by it. But as a communication, I can't really say if there is like this interaction and some kind of exchange of experiences, but at least there is some kind of inspiration, movements that were inspired by the Indignados movement in Spain. There's been some communication, especially from Portugal to Brazil, and how the landless movement used to act in the 1990s. They were kind of inspired because in the beginning they felt that only the Middle East was their, the Arab Spring was their inspiration, but then they were kind of looking towards Latin America and how Argentina and Brazil fought the economic crisis. And so there is inspiration, but I don't think there is an exchange of experiences.
Greg, did you have an observation related to that in terms of the benefit that would accrue from those kinds of connections, or is that what you were getting at with that?
Yeah, I've seen a little of it with some activists, like you said, with the Occupy movement, connecting with activists in the Middle East that have been involved in the Arab Revolution. A little bit of, like John was saying, being inspired by each other, and a little bit of sharing strategy. So I was just wondering if there were other examples of that with Brazilian youth, where they, and you gave some good examples, I think, of being inspired by, and it'd be interesting to know if there's also actually more collaboration where they're saying like, hey, we're trying this, what have you tried, you know, what's similar and different in our countries that could make this work or not work. So yeah, that was helpful what you said.
In a related question, I wanted to ask you about intergenerational dimension. Are in the efforts that are going on in Brazil, and there are a lot of cool ones that you've outlined and written about in the past, Raquel, and any of the others that you're familiar with, are there intergenerational connections, intergenerational transfer of knowledge and learning taking place, or is this primarily the province of youth, the way things are unfolding?
No, I think there is intergenerational connections. I think social media is spreading through older people. So we're seeing now parents and grandparents and these other generations getting into social media. However, I'm not sure how much this generation are talking to each other. For example, when I was interviewing some youngsters from for my work, they were saying that they have two profiles, one for their parents, another one for their friends. And the same thing was true about Orkut. When they were in Orkut, they had one family profile where they would discuss their everyday life with their parents and their families. And they had another profile, which was their actual profile for friends and for other youngsters. So I think everybody is going to social media, but I don't think everybody's talking to each other.
And I wanted to ask about I mean, Brazil is a young democracy, so I wanted to ask what you thought was captivating or compelling to young people. What is engaging them about social media and the internet? And it doesn't sound like there's a lot sort of coming from institutions, so they're sort of learning about it and talking about it, and then they're actually doing in some cases, some really substantial things. So what's capturing youth interest in the whole domain?
That's a great question. I think it's the possibility to interact with other people, and also something that I think social media struck young people is how easily they can have access to values they want for their everyday life. For example, how easily you can be popular in Facebook, how easily you can have access to what other people are talking about, and how you can get in touch with other people. So I think there is a lot of value for these young people. So this is something very that I think very important for them to be online.
All right, Zhao, I think you had a comment or observation about democracy and sort of experiences from abroad.
Yes, just about what Greg asked me, because I forgot. Last year there was this massive real democracy movement, especially from the United States and Europe. And in Brazil, I mean, corruption is a real problem, a real issue that have motivated activism, especially since the 1980s and in the beginning of the 1990s. But now this kind of protest is going online, going to the web, and people are creating events on Facebook, or trying to come up with a single hashtag on Twitter. And so there was this movement that happened in September 7 last year, on the day of the independence. And it gathered lots of people, first in Brasilia, the capital, but then after the October 15 movement in Europe, it kind of grew here in Brazil, and this movement integrated the same worldwide platform of the real democracy movement. It was just that I remember just a couple of minutes after I stopped talking.
That's okay, and I appreciate that. I did want to ask you about, someone had mentioned, maybe Greg had mentioned, Occupy. What is the current sort of state of Occupy in Brazil? Is it sort of in a stasis? Is it active? Is it growing?
Well, can I say something about this too? I hope I'm not talking too much.
No, that's for anyone. Go ahead. Go ahead, Zhao. Did we lose him?
No, I'm not listening.
I think he froze.
We lost him. Okay.
Froze.
I
think maybe Anton can talk about Occupy a little bit.
Lots of
we have some people doing something as Occupy in Rio because of remotions of favelas. There are a strong movement of the government, of the mayor, to remove poor people from all the lands that they occupy. And there are people doing some movement to defend these people, and using a movement Occupy-alike to do it, is the Ocupa Rio the movement.
Okay, we're getting within about 5 or 6 minutes of the top of the hour, and we like to honor the time on these. And I wanted to give each of our Hangout participants any sort of last comments or questions or remarks, anything at all. Starting with you, Adriana.
Well, I'd like to just thank especially Raquel for this participation. My last question is for us to think about what kind of values are we creating in this context of social media, because Raquel quoted something interesting that she said, people think that it's very easy to become famous or something like that. And I think there are lots of people, young people, I would say, in Brazil that are thinking about a kind of appropriation of social media as if it were the mass communication that we always had. Like, I'd like to be a star, and I'd like to live by that, become a celebrity or something. And in this kind of process, I think we miss the most important thing about social media, that everyone can be what they always wanted to be. And so now they are creating this kind of different personas, and so we are dividing everything again, like one profile for my mother and my father, etc., and another profile for the people who I work with. And this kind of dynamics, I think in a certain way it's interesting, but in another blurs this this preoccupation that we have, that people live their lives according to their values. I don't know if I have expressed myself. Okay.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, you know, there's a lot of us, I mean, in the work that we're doing in America, wrestling with similar issues. I mean, there is a need for some intervention, you know, to guide youth in terms of their digital footprints and behavior online and civil discourse and all those sorts of things. So I totally connect with that. Greg, did you have a final remark or comment?
Sure, I really appreciate this discussion. One thing that I guess I'm left with thinking about was a little bit what Raquel and a couple others were talking about, which is this this flaming that goes on, where rather than seeking to understand something deeper, you just state your position or you get mad. You know, you hear a new position, you get mad. And just in terms of education, it seems like that could be a really good role for schools to be playing in this, is how do we use this media more effectively? How do we engage? And so if schools, and they do it in the US too, they've pushed away from, you know, the use of Facebook or Twitter or even the internet in schools because it's hard to control. And in fact, what should be done is schools talk about, what do you do when you see something like this that you completely disagree with? And it just seems like it could be a really valuable role about how we do use these tools better. So it's made me think about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. Dr. Rentu?
I think that we live today a very dangerous moment in the world history, with the big debts in the United States and Europe, and poor and the people, the middle class, becoming poor in all countries, and some freedoms are cutting, and internet made it become very interesting. It Occupy movement, Anonymous, WikiLeaks, etc. All that made something. Seems that this kind of poorness and a moment cannot push us to a Nazi solution or a fascist solution. I think that the internet perhaps is a difference in media from the 20s and 30s of the last century in this case. Population can talk and population can act and coordinate these actions by social networks, Twitter, etc.
Thank you. Jao, just a final thought or comment, reflection on today?
Okay. Well, my final thought is from a Global Voices contributor perspective that all of these discussions and problems we discuss here, it's present in social media. And what we try to do in Global Voices is kind of aggregating, curating what's going on and trying to create discussions and about hate speech, about movements and religion and so on. But I'm a kind of a positive, I'm an optimistic. I think we'll find our way throughout this ugly path of internet.
Thanks, Jao. Raquel, any last thoughts or comments?
No, I have, sorry if I focus too much on the dark side, but I think this is something that's capturing my attention now. We're always talking about how much good social media can do and how much effective it can be for social movements and for our democracy. But I also feel we need to discuss the other things that are happening. So thank you all people who are participating here and on the live stream. So thank you.
All right, thank you everybody in the Hangout and Raquel especially, and look forward to hearing more. I want to remind everyone, later on today there'll be an archive of this session on connectedlearning.tv under Raquel's name and title, and all of the Hangout participants, their contact information will be there. All of the stories and documents that are referenced will also be there. John Baraloni, our community manager, does a great job curating all of that. That'll all be up on the site. Our next session is next week. I think it's Monday. No, I think it's Monday, August 6th, if I'm not correct. Rafi Santo on hacker literacies, why youth should know how to revise and reconfigure technology. And in the meantime, check back on the site. There's a lot of all of our sessions are all archived there, and there's a lot of great links and resources. Also, the participation level is really a huge part of how these things work successfully. The conversations and comment threads on each archive session is there on the site too. Really welcome you to go back and check those out. Add comments, questions, resources. We're all sort of sharing and learning in real time here as this conversation is kind of made evident. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.